For saying that I thought I was going to completely fail Vlogmas, I've actually managed to put out a video every day for the last 16 days. Tomorrow is day 17 and I have no footage in the archives to put out. So if I want to make another video, I'm going to have to start filming stuff again. And one of the videos that I had kind of wanted to make was just like a super quick high level review of all of the books that I've read this year. I also every year for the last few years have been trying to read more than the year before, and I measure this both in the number of books read and the height of the book tower that I can create. Normally I have some idea how I'm doing because the tower of books just grows as I'm reading them, but this year we moved part way through, so all of the books that I've read this year are in a big box. I don't think I've done as well this year, but I don't know how many books I am off my target, so we're going to find out now. I have a cold, you can probably tell, so this isn't going to be the most probably well shot or aesthetic video. Don't have that much energy. I know the lighting is terrible, I have no makeup on, but I am determined to get this done, so bear with me. I've got my cup of tea ready and prepped to help with the croaky throat, but yeah, let's get into it.
2 hours later.
I'm gonna start here with Ducks, because it's the biggest book that I've read, so it's gonna make a really good base. So Ducks is the first graphic novel that I've ever read, and that was on my list of things that I wanted to do this year, was to read my first graphic novel. So it's all about this woman's experience working in the oil fields in Canada. It is bleak, it's so bleak. I don't know why I sort of initially picked it up and thought it was going to be like a dystopian fiction. It still very much has dystopian vibes, but is real life. I can totally recommend it if you are up for a slightly sobering read, but also the artwork is delightful. I really enjoyed this, and it definitely made me want to read more graphic novels. So following that, I have been listening to a lot more audiobooks this year. So I was walking to work a lot, which takes about used to take about an hour each way. And now we're living out in the country. I'm listening to audiobooks a lot when I just potter around and clean. And I have gone through the entire Terry Pratchett Death series now. I've really enjoyed all of them, and I'm looking forward to starting my next series. So I guess maybe next I'll go through all the witch storyline. I think that's one of them. But anyway, yes, really enjoying listening to audiobooks. Really loving Terry Pratchett. Also, in terms of audiobooks, I listened to Good Omens this year. In fact, I think this was the first audiobook that I listened to this year. I mean, it's just a classic, isn't it? It's great, it's just fun, and easy to listen to when you're walking about. Ben Aranovich, Rivers of London. This is the first book in his series, and the only one that I've read. I've recently finished it. I picked it up in Aberdeen Airport, I think, when I was on my way to Munich. I really enjoyed this. I really like the covers of his books, so I've been meaning to start this series for ages, and it didn't disappoint. It's kind of like a supernatural crime drama. Good stuff. This was the first series I read this year. So 6 Crimson Cranes and The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. They're just like a really nice, easygoing fantasy, dragons, pearls, princesses. It was just cute and a good way to start the year. I read them really quickly. So Another series that I got through very quickly was the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. So there's the Scythe, there's Thunderhead, and there's the Toll. Dystopian young adult fiction. Just like such a cracking story. I thought it was really different from anything that I've read before. And I thought it was really interesting how actually my favourite character was the sort of the AI that runs the world. And it was just really interesting to me that that could be my favourite character in a book. But yeah, definitely recommend. We have Mrs. Caliban. So I finished reading that last night. It was a super quick read. It's really short. It's about a woman, a sort of disillusioned housewife that falls in love with Larry, the frogman who has escaped from a scientific institute. It's really different kind of monster romance. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of bleak. I think the ending made me feel a bit like disappointed, I think. But yeah, super quick read. Enjoyed it. So Richard Osman's Thursday Murder Club mystery books are real comfort reads of mine. I just find all of the characters really comforting. I think this is the third and the fourth in the series. I just really enjoyed them. I feel like they're all just really good. I have nothing more to say on that. Good, comforting mystery novels. I seem to be picking out all of the series. So the Atlas 6 and the Atlas Paradox. So there's another one that I still need to read, I think, to complete the trilogy. I really enjoyed the Atlas 6 and was really intrigued with where it was going. I enjoyed the sequel less. It's just like a young adult fiction set. I think it's like dark academia style fantasy. Like, I'm enjoying it. I will finish the trilogy, but it does leave me wanting more. There's something lacking for me, but I think it's maybe not feeling like I really care for any of the main characters. Like, I kind of don't super care what happens to them, who lives, who dies. So I think maybe that's what's lacking for me, any real sense of like urgency or peril. Okay, Bride. It's a romance novel between werewolves and vampires. Need I say more? Okay, David Eddings' Porn of Prophecy. I don't know if you can tell just how well read this book is. So I was obsessed with David Eddings as a teenager. But I reread The Redemption of Althalus when I had COVID a few years ago, and I absolutely hated it. I thought it was awful. I thought it was misogynistic. I thought like the female characters were so badly written, and it was just the same tired tropes over and over again. Like, I couldn't believe that I ever enjoyed the book. And I have all of David Eddings' books, and suddenly I was like, damn, like, am I gonna have to get rid of them all? Do I just hate them all? So this year I made myself reread The Porn of Prophecy, which is the first book in the Belgariad series, just to see if they were all as bad and I had terrible opinions as a teenager. But actually I really enjoyed this, and it made me want to reread the Belgariad series, which I will hopefully do in 2025. Yeah, I don't know, maybe just a few of them are hit or miss now that I've grown up and I have more developed opinions. But yeah, great stuff. Shantaram classic. It's a beefy book, and I think this is one of the first books I read this year. It took me a long time to get through, and I think actually this is one of the reasons I got into a bit of a reading slump this year. I love Shantaram. It's not the first time that I've read it, or maybe even the second. I think this could have been my third read. But it's long, and I think when it gets to the bit where he goes to Afghanistan, I find from then on really difficult. For me, it's his journey in India that I find particularly interesting. So maybe that's just a lesson to me in the future, to stop reading when I get to the sort of whole Afghanistan part. But yeah, I mean, this is a classic. Okay, Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I bought this because I liked the cover, and it was buy one get one half price, and I must have wanted another book at the time. I also bought it because it involves video gaming, and I really like video gaming. I thought this was a really beautiful story about relationships, friendships and romantic relationships. Yeah, I really liked it, can recommend. So one of my challenges this year was to read a book by an author from each letter of the alphabet, and I needed a U. So I went into Waterstones and was like trawling around for a author's surname that started with U that I was semi-interested in, and we came out with Lies We Sing to the Sea. It's another young adult fiction, and it's sort of like a Greek mythology spin-off. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice story. The ending is maybe I'm just a sucker for a happy ending. There is not a happy ending. It's not the worst ending in the world. But yeah, it left me feeling a bit like, oh, like, that's so sad. Old Country. Okay, similarly, I bought this book because I needed an author that started with a Q. So Matt Query and Harrison Query have written Old Country, and it was a different story for me. It's like a horror set in the American backcountry. I liked the premise. I hated the two main characters, particularly the male main character. I thought he was just problematic, obnoxious. It kept talking about his military career, and I, quite frankly, could not care less about how many people this guy killed in Afghanistan or wherever it was. Like, I feel like, okay, it was part of his backstory, but I didn't need to keep hearing about how many people he'd shot and what it anyway. So I don't think I will keep holding on to this book. I think I will pass it off to charity. Good premise. I don't think I ever want to read it again. I also read, so this is a reread, but I reread it because I needed an author that began with X. So Jin Ran, The Good Women of China. So I used to have an obsession with China and Chinese history. I don't know what happened to that, but it's really interesting, and I think it's a really important book about women's history in China, but it's tough. Like, it's a really tough read, and after I finished reading it, I definitely felt like I needed a real soft and cheery palate cleanser. So yeah, I guess read with caution. So I read the book version of Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro and Cornelia Funk. I love the movie and I love the book. Okay, so The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor. It's like a sci-fi fantasy. It's not even a fantasy, it's a sci-fi. I don't know, I liked it, but I feel like, again, it was just missing for something for me, and I think Again, like I mentioned with the Atlas trilogy, I just don't really care about any of the characters. And I think if I don't care about what happens to the characters, like I'm not as invested in the story. So I don't think I'll keep this. I think this will go to charity because I can't ever see myself rereading it. Okay, so Gold by Raven Kennedy. It's a like romance fantasy, a romantasy. It's the 5th book in the series, and I found this one to be the most disappointing. To be honest, I thought this was the last book in the series, and I was really hoping that it was just going to wrap up the whole thing, and that I could move on. But I was like, I don't know, it was just a lot of pages of kind of, I guess, character development. I just wasn't really into it. So Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I love the Jurassic Park movies. So I wanted to read the book, and I didn't realise how much more likeable the characters were in the movie. I feel like they are far meaner in the book, and that was really interesting to me. And some of the sort of like the differences in how events occur between the book and the movie was really interesting to me. So I really enjoyed reading this. So we have The Productivity Ninja by Graham Alcott. This is a workbook. So I read this for work. I went on the course this year, I think, on how to be a productivity ninja. I really enjoyed the course. It was more about like how to be more productive so that you have more free time, not like how can you be more productive so that you can work harder and give more to your boss. So I kind of liked the sort of balance, like work-life balance aspect of it. Lots of interesting tips and tricks if you are interested in learning how to be more productive, I guess. I tend to read a lot of Japanese fiction. So I chose this, because I really liked the brightly coloured cover, but also because it is Korean fiction for a change. So the Dalagut Dream Department Store, really different concept, really interesting. I think there's a sequel, so I will look forward to reading that. Here we have The Rig by Roger Levy. I thought this was really interesting. It's a sci-fi. It's different to what I expected. There are like several interconnected storylines, and I really didn't see how people's storylines were going to connect. So it was really interesting to me how he managed to weave everything together. I feel like I need to read this again to truly understand what was happening. So I look forward to doing that maybe next year, maybe in a couple of years, but yeah. So Loch of the Dead, so I bought this because it's set at Loch Maree, which is one of the lochs that we've driven past. I don't think we ever really properly visited it, but it's a really interesting like horror, fantasy, historical fiction, and I think there must be different books with the same detectives. Yeah, I think there are. I read this sort of like at the beginning of the year, so my memory's a bit lazy on it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would read more from Oscar de Muriel about these two detectives. So this year was the first year that I ever read any Stephen King. So I started with Pet Sematary. I think actually I wanted to read the Tommyknockers, but I couldn't find it in Waterstones. So I picked up Pet Sematary partly because Stephen King says it's the scariest book he feels he's ever written. So I wanted to know what that was like. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't have described it as scary, more I think disturbing, especially the ending, but it did make me want to read more Stephen King. And then I also picked up the first book in his fantasy series, The Gunslinger. I'm I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if I really got it. I would like to read more, and I think I would actually just like to reread this one. I was reading it on the train in between a lot of meetings that I had in different cities around Scotland. So I think maybe I just wasn't giving it enough of my full attention. Maybe I needed to concentrate more. Because like I said, I just didn't get it. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to reading more Stephen King. One of my favourite genres of books, if it can be called a genre, is books that feature cats or have cats on the cover. And these are all of those books. So I read 3 of the Before the Coffee Gets Cold books this year. They're just really cute. I find them really quick to read. I think one comment I do have about them is that I find them really repetitive. So there's a lot of repetition about what the rules are, and I can find that gets a bit boring, and I kind of just skim read over those bits until I get to the meat of the story, until I sort of find out what a specific character is up to. I think maybe they're not meant to be read in quick succession like I was reading them. But yeah, I really enjoy them. I think they're just super cute little novels. The Kamigawa Food Detectives is kind of in a similar vein to Before the Coffee Gets Cold books. They're just really cute, really heartwarming stories. Days at the Morisaki bookshop. I feel like I'm going to say this for all the sort of Japanese kitty books. Like, I just find them like super cute and heartwarming. It's the same for the Cat in the City. Like, they're just nice stories, often about kind of normal people, normal experiences. They're just lovely, quite calm, relaxing books to read. Beyond the Gravy, this is from a series of books by Mandy Morton in which cats solve crime. These cats are kind of like humans, as in they talk, they wear clothes, they have personalities, they drink tea, whereas the cat who caught a killer is a cat that helps solve a crime, but the cat kind of only talks to one person, who is a detective, or former police detective. So slightly different cats that solve crime, but cats that solve crime nonetheless. What more can you want? The Ghost Cat by Alex Howard was so cute. It was kind of heartbreaking. So it's about a cat that has kind of has to spend his 9 lives a little differently and travels through different time periods. I don't want to say too much about it. It's set in Edinburgh. It's really sweet. It did make me, I think it made me cry at one point. There was one particular scene, as it were, that was just really heartfelt and made me get all teary. Okay, that tower is looking sketchy. This video is so much longer than I expected it to be. Okay, so we have Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. I wanted to read more classics and more sort of classic science fiction and fantasy this year. So I picked up this one because I loved the film when I was a kid. Strange, but I love it. I mean, what an unusual story. Yeah, incredible. I also read A Hideous Progeny, set in Scotland, and is kind of based on the Frankenstein horror. It's a little bit different, but yeah, I enjoyed it. The Last Witch of Scotland by Philip Paris. So I think this is like very loosely built off the story of the real Last Witch of Scotland, or I should say the last woman killed for being a witch. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. It was interesting. It was a well-woven story. Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I thought this was going to be a one-off. I didn't realise it was part of a series, and sometimes I just want a one-off because I have so many series going at the same time. I don't like having too many series going at the same time because I forget things. It feels like too much of a, not a responsibility, like a, I don't know, I'm losing my words. I just don't like it. But actually, I was really glad at the end of this that there were more books coming because I really enjoyed it. I kind of don't want to say why because I feel like it'll be giving too much of the story away. But yeah, it was really good. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So I was bought this for my birthday a couple of years ago, and I just wasn't that interested in reading it, but I also did want to because it was really popular when it came out. I thought, well, it had to be popular for a reason. When I finally got around to reading it, I wondered like why I'd waited so long. I really enjoyed this story. It's different to what I would normally read. Really interesting. It's about a reporter who listens to the story of a very famous celebrity who has been married 7 times, or yeah, been married 7 times but hasn't had 7 loves. I read another H.G. Wells, which was War of the Worlds, so going back to wanting to read more of the sci-fi classics this year. It was really good. I really liked it. I'd like to read it again because I think just the language and the style of writing is quite different to what I would normally read. So I think maybe some things got lost in translation, I guess. And I would really like to listen to the radio broadcast that went out. But yeah, what a cool story. Okay, the Arc Sakura. So I bought this because I liked the cover. Sometimes that works out really well for me, sometimes not so much. And the description on the back, like underground bunker and nuclear disaster, I was like, love a bit of that. This book was so weird. I don't even really know what I read. Do I even want to read it again? Kinda. Like, I don't even know what to say. It was not what I expected. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry is my first ever Western novel. So one of my favourite video games ever is Red Dead Redemption, and I think that kind of started like some sort of love or yearning to learn more about that genre. Red Dead Redemption has the most wonderful game storyline. I still feel deeply for the characters, so I really wanted to try a Western novel, and I heard that this was one of the best Western novels out there, but it is a chunky one to start with. I struggled to get into it, but once I was in and I cared about the characters so much. I loved it. Like Red Dead Redemption, I feel deeply about the characters in this book, and I look forward to reading more in this world. Yeah, this feels like a rogue one to throw in, but Living with Headaches by Dr. Mark Weatherall. I get a lot of headaches. I suffer with the occasional migraine. I don't know what is occasional, but I wanted to understand my headaches more and what I could do and understand what was going on with me. My mum sent me this book. I read it. It was very helpful. If you have headaches, want to read about them, there you go. Okay, The Fellowship of the Ring, the first Lord of the Rings novel. For someone that loves fantasy, it's probably a surprise to hear that I have never read Lord of the Rings. I have read The Hobbit. I've also never managed to watch the movies. I find them really boring and I've always fallen asleep. But this year I decided to try and walk to Mordor, which is 1,720 miles. And I thought as I did that, I would read the books, and I thought it would make me feel more connected to the story if I could walk and read at the same time. Wow. Anyway, it worked. I'm enjoying the book a lot more. I'm gonna rebuild my tower. Oh. Do you know what? I'm just gonna rebuild that at the end of the video because it's just a mess. So, Bookshops and Bone Dust. This is a prequel to Legends and Lattes. The East is just like a cozy orc fantasy. Cute, low stakes. Sunbringer by Hannah Craner. Sunbringer by Hannah Craner. This is the second in the series. Again, this is one of those series where I started reading thinking the first book was like a one-off, and then it turned out that there were going to be multiple books, which was kind of disappointing to me. I started reading them purely because the illustrator who illustrated the cover is a chap that I used to know from my days in Hereford. We no longer speak, we are not friends. He was a nice guy. So I was like, oh, that's awesome that he's illustrated these novels, and I thought they were really beautifully illustrated, so I wanted to read the story that went with the illustration. I liked the first novel. Again, it goes back to this feeling of not caring about the characters. I don't care what happens to any of the characters except, I guess, the tiny little god that hangs out with one of the like young main characters. Except for that tiny little god, I could not care less what happens to any of these people in this series, so it makes me enjoy the story less. But yeah, I know a lot of people that absolutely love it, so you can make your own mind up. Oh, the box is empty except for this final book, which is Attack Warning Red. So I kind of got to know of Julie McDowell from her podcast and her Twitter feed. So she is a nuclear history reporter. I find nuclear history really interesting. So I bought this for my friend for his birthday, and then I bought myself a copy because I really wanted to read it, and rather than just borrow it from him, I wanted to like support Julie McDowell in the tiniest way I possibly could. I really enjoyed this book. It's quite heavy. It's a nuclear history book, so of course it's going to be heavy. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I didn't even think about how I was going to end this video. I guess I will rebuild my tower and show you how much I've read. Okay, so I haven't done as badly as I thought. So if I get it together, I cannot let this go. This is terrifying. But if I get it together, read maybe like 5 more books by the end of the year. 5 books in 2 weeks. Could be challenging, but I'm going to Italy and I read a lot on the plane. So I think if I get it together, I could hit my target of reading more than I did last year. Wish me luck. I probably won't do an update, but maybe post something on Instagram. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different to what I would normally film. I hope my voice wasn't too annoying. But yeah, thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Mattia just reminded me that I borrowed the 3-body problem trilogy from a guy at work. So they were quite chunky. So I think I've done it.